everyone. Welcome to Buddhism Talks. I am very excited today because we're going to talk about karma, which is one of the most powerful and empowering concepts in Buddhism, and yet often misunderstood or misrepresented. So, I'm going to start with some basics like what is it, the two kinds, and most importantly, I want to get to how to change it, how to transform it, how to use it as part of your purpose in life. So, I'm going to just jump right in. So when I started practicing 40 years ago, karma was not a common concept. And now we have things like credit karma. We have ads talking about karma. Then you've got the series of White Lotus, which takes you into Buddhist temples in Thailand. So the term karma in modern terms is often used in terms of retribution, like karma's going to get you and bad karma and karma is a whatever. Now that's a very limited understanding of karma, as many things in society are these days. So many things in society have been oversimplified and turned into sound bites. But I think it's really important to study a little bit more, to think about it a bit more, and to ponder it, whether you've been practicing Buddhism or not. I think it's an important concept that we continue to practice through, learn from, and deepen our understanding of. So, for many hundreds, thousands of years, people have had a sense that there might be some kind of a destiny that's influencing their lives, that there might be powers greater than themselves bearing down on their lives. So even before Christianity, the Greeks thought that we were puppets of the gods, that we were chess pieces on a chessboard that they were playing around with, and we were at the mercy of the gods. Then we moved along to Christianity. And in Christianity, there was a sense that our life was in God's hands. There was always this sense of there's got to be something else in charge because I'm not sure why my life is like this and other people's lives are different than mine. So there must be other powers and forces at play. If you look at countries like India, where there was a caste system, there was a sense of that you're born into a certain level of society and there you will stay. There is nothing you can do to move between the castes. So this sense of ingrained destiny and forces bigger than we can fathom at play has been around for a long time. Now, even in the early Buddhist teachings, there was a sense that you had to suffer lifetime after lifetime. In certain teachings, you had to be reborn as a man. You couldn't attain enlightenment as a woman. And there are many different types of Buddhism. So this, as I keep saying, this is why I'm only talking about Nichiren Buddhism as practiced in the SGI. I'm not an expert on any other kind of Buddhism, nor am I technically an expert on this one. I've just practiced and studied and experienced it for 40 years. So I have a little bit to offer. So in terms of this kind of thinking and this kind of rationale, it created a certain result in people. So what did it lead to? So if you have a belief that there's certain aspects of your life that are ingrained, that this is your lot in life, that there are exterior forces that you are at the mercy of, what does it lead to? It leads to complete disempowerment, actually, and it can lead to minimal hope. It also leads to accepting suffering. That's the big problem. It can lead to an acceptance of suffering and an allowance for forces of power to run the show. So these are the outcomes that can happen when you have these beliefs. And ultimately, it really diminishes hope. You can only hope so much. You can only hope to minimize suffering. Your dreams can't be too big, and your sense of happiness is limited. That's the outcome. And whether you're talking about the ancient Greeks, ancient Christianity, ancient Buddhism, there's this undercurrent of acceptance. So now I'm going to read 3 quotes that kind of blow up this thinking and reveal the true power of our lives and of this concept of karma and what it really means. So Jose Toda, the second president, said, "Never accept suffering as your destiny." And he said that to a room of Japanese people that were suffering after the atomic bombs went off. They had every reason in the world to accept suffering as their destiny. And he was able to stand in front and say, "Never accept suffering as your destiny." So that's quote number 1. Second quote is from Daisaku Ikeda from the essay Making Hope, which is one of my favorites. And he says, if we cannot feel hope, it is time to create some. And then finally, Nichiren Daishonin says, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is like the roar of a lion. What sickness can therefore be an obstacle? So, how does Buddhism view karma? And more importantly, how does Nichiren Daishonen's Buddhism view karma, especially as practiced in our daily lives in the lay organization Soka Gakkai? So, that's what I'm going to talk about today. I hope that even from these three quotes, you can sense a different attitude about destiny, about karma, and about our ability to transform our lives. So now we're going to go back to the basics. So, what is karma? Technically, karma is a Sanskrit word and it means action. So, the term existed even before Buddhism. Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha from 2,500 years ago that taught all the various teachings and taught the Lotus Sutra in the last 8 years of his life, that guy, he maintained that what makes a person noble or humble is not birth, but one's actions. So the Buddhist view of karma was not only a way of explaining the present, but also as the potential force through which to influence the future. So karma means actions. It's not about status, it's not about title, it's about action. Karma refers to our actions in thought, speech, and deed. So it's an accumulation of causes. So we make causes all the time, and they each have an effect. So what we think, what we say, and what we do creates a cause. And eventually, there's an effect from all those causes. So this brings us to this law of cause and effect that is a core principle in Buddhism. Essentially, our life is an accumulation of all the causes that we make in this lifetime and in past lifetimes. The one that's always tricky for me that I always think I can get away with is my thinking. So actions, you kind of can understand that there's going to be an effect from things that you do. When you say things, it's pretty understandable that there's going to be effect in terms of if you're praising somebody, if you're insulting somebody, it's going to create an effect. That's easy to understand. Thinking is a bit more subtle. It's very easy to believe that because you're thinking it, nobody hears it. Even when we're thinking about other people in a certain way, when we're thinking about ourselves in a certain way, even though it's silent, it makes a cause. In the SGI Buddhist Dictionary, it says, it is our karma that accounts for the circumstances of one's birth, one's individual nature, and in general, the differences among all living beings and their environment. Our karma is the country that we're born in, the family that we're born in, our basic physical characteristics. That's all part of our karma. It's all part of who we are. It's positive and negative. When they say karma is going to get you, it's not negative. Karma is both positive and negative. It is not inherently good or bad. We decide whether it's good or bad in terms of what we do with it. On a definition on the Soka Global website, it says that karma can be thought of as our core personality, the profound tendencies that have been impressed into the deepest levels of our lives. Essentially, all of our thoughts, words, and deeds create an imprint in our lives. They are causes that will have effects at some point in their life. There's a really great article on Soka Global that talks about the 9 consciousnesses, which I'll touch on lightly today. I could do a whole podcast just about that concept. But essentially, what it is saying in this article, it says, while the image of a storehouse, like a karmic storehouse, is helpful, a truer image may be that of a raging torrent of karmic energy. So it's better to look at it as a river. This energy is constantly moving through and shaping our lives and experiences. Our resultant thoughts and actions are then fed back into this karmic flow. The quality of the karmic flow is what makes each of us distinct beings, our unique selves. The flow of energy is constantly changing, but like a river, it maintains an identity and a consistency even through successive cycles of life and death. It is this aspect of fluidity, this lack of fixity, that opens the possibility of transforming the content of the 8th consciousness, which is the karmic storehouse. This is why karma, properly understood, is different from an unchanging or unavoidable destiny. So this shift in thinking about karma is crucial. If you are only looking at your life in terms of pluses and minuses and set limitations, that is not actually the truth of your life. Your life is constantly moving and changing. So what really matters is what are the causes you're making today? That's really what is going to change the direction of the river. This is why it's so important to understand this concept of karma. And it's also the value of having a Buddhist practice and chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, because what we are able to access when we chant is a level that is deeper than our karma. We actually connect with that eternal river and flow of life itself, of the universe itself. And I know for some that it might be hard to believe, but it actually happens and it works. And I'll get to some experiences around that. So the question for us becomes, what causes am I making now to change that river? And what causes am I making to increase the positive aspects of karma? Now I'm going to get a little bit more theoretical. So technically, in Buddhist teachings, there are two kinds of karma. There is immutable karma and there's mutable karma. Clearly, that means one is changeable and one is not. And Daishonin says that if you're able to bring out your pure enlightened life condition, you can even change the immutable karma. Never mind the mutable stuff. Before we move on, I want to share with you 4 ways that we make immutable karma, which is like what, when you think of like, what are the causes that make this really deep, almost impossible to change kind of karma? Like, what does that? Right? I found it very interesting when I came across this explanation because it also gives us areas of focus for creating positive immutable karma. So here's the 4 things. So the first one is actions that come from very strong desires. They can be desires that come from delusions or illusions. It could be desires that are just so strong we can't control ourselves and we continue to have self-destructive tendencies because we have an illusion about the value of our lives. That's the negative. On the positive end, the desire to encourage people regularly, the desire to work for a more peaceful planet. So those kinds of desires on both sides will create different kinds of immutable karma. And the second way we create immutable karma is actions that are repeated over time, which sounds like, really? You create immutable karma just by repeating stuff? Absolutely. According to Buddhism, the example I put here was like daily nagging or daily complaining. That is a repeated action. Every day I complain. Every day I nag people. Every day I criticize. Every day I begrudge. Even though it's small, you think, oh, these are small complaints. These are small doubts. It's okay if I criticize a little bit this person or, but it's the repetition that makes them immutable. It's not the fact that you do it once in a while. If you do it regularly over time, even that small negative cause turns into immutable karma. That repetition is what actually makes things become immutable and sinks them deeper into our lives. The third one is actions, whether good or bad, towards the teaching of Buddhism. This is not about the religion of Buddhism or dogma itself. Buddhism teaches that life is inherently respect-worthy. So when it talks about actions that are good or bad towards the teaching, it means actions that are good or bad towards the truth that life is respect-worthy. So it's actions towards that truth, whether you support whether you support a respect for life or whether you don't and you go against it. The fourth one is actions taken towards one's mother or father. First, read this, I was a little bit surprised that this would be such a powerful cause because there's people who don't know their parents. Some people have very challenging relationships with their parents. But I think part of it, when you're looking at karma, your parents are part of your karmic flow. They're part of that river. Whether you know them or not, whether they are a huge supportive force or a negative force, they are part of your karma. So there's an aspect of acknowledgement, gratitude, of healing that is important as you move to transform your own karma. And it has to be acknowledged and dealt with on some level. So I think those are the four profound areas that if we put energy to them, we can create really positive immutable karma. If we use our strong positive desires, if we repeat positive actions over time, if we make efforts to respect the dignity of life, and fourth, if we make efforts to express some level of gratitude for our parents and ultimately all the people that are part of our karmic family flow. Like, what's the purpose of all of that theory? The purpose of that theory is to understand that you can change your karma. So, how do we change all of this deep seated stuff we don't even know where it comes from? How can you possibly change it? This is where the concept of the nine consciousnesses comes in. And this has got to be one of my favorite concepts. So, I'm going to give you the simplest version of this that I hope you'll be able to understand, and it will stay with you as a way of understanding the nine consciousnesses. So, I'm going to start off with imagining this as a waking up process. Buddhism explains that there are 9 levels of consciousness. So the first 5, very simple. It's our 5 senses: sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch. Those are our 5 senses. Those are the 5 initial layers of consciousness. So when you think of being born, and there's a baby in the belly, one of the first senses it gets is hearing. It can see light changing outside. So you've got those 2 senses kicking in. When it's born, all the other 3 kick in. So the 6th level of consciousness is the integration of those senses. So it means that with our sight, we can say that's red. Our tongue, we can identify it's hot. So the 7th level is where it gets exciting. That is when one realizes they are distinct from other people. There is a sense of identity. That is where the ego is. That is where spirituality, judgment come from. That is where all the levels of your uniqueness start to kick in. In that awareness, in the 7th consciousness, also comes this understanding of death. And that is also where the fears around death come up, is in the 7th, because you understand that at some point there will be an ending. So all those dimensions of who we are kick in the 7th consciousness. Our personality, our judgments, our preferences, our biases, all of that comes in through the 7th level of consciousness. So you would think maybe that's where it ends. This is who I am. What else do I need? I know how I think. I know what I believe. This is how I live. Buddhism says there's an 8th level of consciousness, which means there is a deeper layer of our lives that is a collection of all of our causes that we've made. It's our deep-seated karma that influences how we live, the things that happen to us, the stuff that follows around that we can't shake off sometimes. And that's technically our karma. Now, the good news is there is a 9th level of consciousness. And this 9th level of consciousness is absolutely pure. It's synonymous with the universe itself. It is unaffected by causes and effects or karma. So the challenge is, how do you get to the 9th level of consciousness? If you think of these layers of consciousness as concentric circles, where you've got the 5 senses, and then you've got the 6th and the 7th and the 8th. If you think of the 9th, the core is Buddhahood. The core is the enlightened flow of the universe. And the core is tapped when we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. When you get to that core enlightened energy, then you can affect all the other levels. The karma can be affected, the ego, the personality, all of that can be affected, and even the 5 senses can be affected. This is going to sound silly. When I chant really powerfully, even food tastes better. My face glows. All of the physical aspects of my life are affected because it has the ability to penetrate all the different layers. So this is a very short explanation of the 9 consciousnesses. But if you think about waking up, and you think about the definition of a Buddha. What is the definition of a Buddha? A Buddha is an awakened one, right? It's somebody who is fully awake. So what happens if you look at a baby in its development? First, it gets the 5 senses. Then it becomes aware of its environment. Next, it starts to develop personality. It recognizes that it's separate from its mother and its father and other people. And over time, it develops its own sense of judgment, preferences, all of that kind of stuff, becomes a unique person. And then at some point throughout life, that awakened being starts to feel that there are certain things affecting its life. There's a certain tendency, there's a certain push, whether it's good luck, bad luck, any of that kind of stuff. People can be not sure of where this is coming from. It's because the 8th level of consciousness is also awake and influencing the flow of one's life. The good news is there's a 9th level of consciousness, because if there wasn't, then our destiny would be set in stone. Our karma would be something that we can't change. It would be, just make the best of it. and you can make energy and you can make causes and work hard and change your career and life and you can make efforts, but it's very difficult to deeply, deeply change karma. However, if you can access your enlightened nature, then everything's up for grabs. Everything's up for change. So this is why the idea of karma, if understood properly, becomes an empowering concept. It simply becomes an explanation of tendencies or forces in your life that are there to be changed. And not just to be changed, they're there so that you can create value out of them. There's this idea that we have in Buddhism that karma is mission. So, whatever my karma is, if I can create value out of my karma, then that becomes my mission. That's my purpose in life, actually. Karma is always there for a valuable, amazing purpose if you so wish to use it that way. So, on this idea of Buddhahood and enlightenment, there's an introductory book from SGI UK that is my favorite introductory book in the world. Canada has one, the US has one, but this UK one is awesome. For those of you in the UK, congrats. This is such a great introduction book. This is what it looks like. And they have been doing revised versions ever since I started practicing. But when I first started practicing, this is the definition that I read, which has really stayed with me the whole time. It talks about what is Buddhahood. Like, what is this thing that we keep talking about? It sounds so esoteric. And he says, Buddha means awakened one. Although it is often perceived as a transcendental state of life separate from daily reality, Buddhahood is a state of life which each individual inherently possesses. That's the good news. At the core of every individual's life is this pure, eternal, powerful life condition. It is a state of awakened enlightenment to the true nature and potential of life. It is a state of being fully awake and fully aware of the potential in your life and of the potential in every situation. It says this awakening brings with it such characteristics as strengthened energy, courage, determination, compassion, and wisdom. That's what Buddhahood feels like. The practical elements of bringing out this enlightened life condition are more courage, more wisdom, more compassion, more energy, more determination, more movement forward. So based on my personal experience, if I were to express Buddhahood in a few simple terms, it is the joy of being alive. It is this feeling and appreciation of life that comes from the depths of your life. And it can come when everything is really negative and horrible around you. I would say that I felt it many times in various situations. It might have been under the most difficult circumstances. There could have been family issues. There could have been health issues. And as I chanted and really fought to bring out this core life condition, what would come out of it was an excitement and a joy of being alive. It's an absolute love of life that is independent from the external circumstances. And the reason I share that is because sometimes these terms can sound so esoteric and distant. And I just always want to give practical expressions, simple versions of these dimensions of life that are very profound. At the same time, I also want to encourage everyone to really experience it for themselves. So the other aspect I loved about this definition is it's saying Buddhahood is not a transcendental state. It's not some zoned out Om place, It is an awakening. It's an awakening and understanding to the potential of your life and everybody else's. Second part of this that's really important is that there are no commandments in Nichiren Buddhism, since basing ourselves on our higher state of life or Buddhahood enables us to make our own moral and ethical judgments. These are based above all on respect for the dignity of all life and a growing awareness of the reality of a strict and inescapable universal law of cause and effect. So that to me was incredibly important when I read it. Number one, this idea of no commandments. Number two is the fact that when you practice Buddhism, you are waking up to the dignity of life, to the need to respect your own life, the lives of others, but also to this law of cause and effect that is at play all the time. And if you can wake up to a law of cause and effect and become more responsible for the causes that you make and understand that responsibility, you will naturally make better causes. You will naturally start to move your life in a more positive direction. So with this awakening of the ninth consciousness comes responsibility, awareness, understanding, appreciation, more respect. And this is why bringing out our Buddhahood is so crucial, particularly now in the world as it is. And the other thing that I want to share is the fact that in Buddhism, we become more responsible for our lives. And when I was younger, I used to think responsibility was a bad word. Like the last thing I wanted was to be more responsible. In my mind, freedom was connected to less responsibility, not more responsibility. And then I remember at one time reading a dialogue series called The Wisdom of the Lotus Sutra, which is a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. And it was a really incredible dialogue. And there was a discussion about, responsibility and freedom and all of that kind of stuff. And then I realized I had my own little enlightened moment. And I realized that unless I take 100% responsibility for my life, there is no freedom. I will be always handing over some responsibility to other people. I will be either blaming them, waiting for them to change. I will be handing over some of the power and responsibility for my life to other people. So it's only when I take full responsibility for my karma, for my life as it is, and there is no guilt involved in any of this. That's the other important thing to change, particularly if we come from religions or cultures that have a lot of guilt in them. And there is a sense of judgment and punishment and all of that kind of stuff. So this idea of being responsible for my life and my karma and all the good and bad things that happen can sound heavy. You can think like, how could this possibly be my fault? It's not about fault. It's got nothing to do with fault. It's got to do with basically accepting this is my life for whatever reason. This is where I'm at right now. It is the result of many different decisions that I have made, and in this lifetime and in past lifetimes. And the minute you say, this is my life, and it is accumulation of stuff that I have created, there's no need for heavy duty judgment or guilt in that awareness. But the minute you say, I'm responsible for my life, and then you decide, well, if I'm responsible for my life up to this point, then I'm going to create something completely different moving forward. And that is the point of the concept of karma. Not for you to think about, what did I do in the past? What was I in a past life? Was I a queen of Egypt, or was I a plumber, or whatever? That is not the point in this Buddhism. The point is to look at what causes will I make in the future, and not worry so much about the past, but to understand that you can completely change the flow of that karmic river at any point. And that's all that you really need to focus on. So the concept of karma is meant to be a concept of empowerment, of liberation, of becoming fully awake to the potential of your life and to the potential of other people's lives. And so the most exciting thing about the concept of the ninth consciousness is when you access your Buddhahood that's at the core of your life, everybody has it, equal access, you can transform anything. You can affect all the layers of your life. And lucky for us, we have access to it. We know the name and the sound of it. And the name and the sound of it is Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. So when we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, what you are doing is calling up that part of your life and bringing out that power. And there is something in your life that recognizes that sound. There is something consciously, subconsciously, something happens when you chant. That's why it's so important, if you haven't chanted, to just try it. Try 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night. See what happens. Then you can try 15 minutes and 15 minutes. And then what I did is I went to half an hour, half an hour. An hour a day has been the basis of my practice for 40 years. That's always what I try to get to, is half an hour in the morning, half an hour at night. Of course, there are times when I'm incredibly busy and it's very hard to do that. So maybe I'll chant a little bit less. Other times when I was dealing with cancer, I would chant for hours every day, because that is what I needed to be able to overcome all the doubts and fears. When you're battling for your life, you don't want to be living from the 8th level of consciousness, where you're thinking about things, reading, studying, all that stuff from all the other levels of consciousness, 1 to 8. I definitely didn't want to be living from the karmic level. Who knows what my karma is? So in my case, if I was going to change my destiny in terms of the karma, I had to go to the 9th. There's no other way to go. What else am I going to use? I'm not going to use the other layers. The same thing with my mom. If you hear the podcast on how to do cancer as a Buddhist, my mom's story is in there. And 2 weeks ago, I saw her surgeon 29 years later now, and I reminded him again that I'm Emma Kazjan's daughter. And he looked at me again and said, your mom's a medical miracle. And if any of you know doctors and specialists, they do not use the word miracle, but he used it in this case. And he said, your mother had the most dangerous, worst kind of cancer possible. And most people don't live past 6 months. And it's been 29 years. So in my mom's case, she had to use the 9th level of consciousness to fight the fear, the despair, the doubts, the heaviness, so in my mom's case, she had to use the 9th because everything around her was telling her that she had 6 months to live. So that's where she lived from for a long time. She chanted a lot so that she could live from the 9th level of consciousness. So we live in the real world, but it's really important for us to take time to just concentrate on bringing out our Buddhahood. Now, the problem is nowadays, especially nowadays, focus is such a rare thing. It is so hard to focus now, even for myself. Again, I'm a big chanter. I've been chanting a long time. There's so many distractions. The phone, I got to put the phone in another room now. I have to stop reading the books while I'm chanting. A little bit of reading is fine because it can be encouraging. It can motivate your chanting. But at the same time, I need to be able to focus. So we need to make the effort and take the time to focus, to tap into our 9th level of consciousness and bring out that enlightened nature. And it is a bit of a battle, but it's worth it because when you tap into the 9th, it affects everything. It affects all the karma. There's a beautiful quote from Nichiren Buddhism about the power of our lives to change all karma. And this was written to a woman. And he says, all the offenses committed by a woman in her lifetime are like dry grass. And the single character myo of the Lotus Sutra is like a small spark. When a small spark is set to a large expanse of grass, not only the grass, but also the big trees and large stones will be consumed. Such is the power of the fire of wisdom in the single character myo. Not only will all offenses vanish, but they will become sources of benefit. So I'm specifically reading this quote for everybody who feels really burdened by their karma and who thinks some of this stuff is impossible to change. He's saying that no matter what your karma is, if you understand that your chanting of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo has the power to change all your past causes into something positive and into growth and into value, you don't have to spend any time suffering or feeling guilty or feeling weighed down by your karma. It's important to chant this way, to chant with that attitude of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, of course I can change my life. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, of course I will win in this area of my life and I will transform this situation. And the other turbojet element of chanting is that when you connect your prayers to a sense of mission and to a sense of purpose in this world, that is literally like going from a bicycle to a rocket. So there's a concept in this Buddha, and we say changing karma into mission. That is this, no matter what we're facing, our purpose is to transform that situation, and that becomes our mission. So again, sorry to use the cancer example again, you're going to get bored of this, but the cancer example is a really good one. Rather than it being about having an illness, it became this incredible opportunity to encourage a lot of people, to support, to chant with a lot of people, to reconnect, and to encourage many other people who have cancer after me. So it was no longer this horrible death sentence. It became my mission. It became my purpose. It became part of the value of my life in this world. And so that's a very important and powerful concept. And that was one of the turning points in my mother's chanting. She didn't just chant for herself. She didn't just say, okay, I'm going to overcome cancer because I want to live. She very clearly said, I'm going to overcome this so I can stand up at the center in front of everybody and encourage a whole room of people. It wasn't just about her. It was, I need to overcome this for the sake of all the other people who have the exact same karma as me. And I have to show what's possible. I'm going to show a different way of managing, of handling, of living this karma. And that way I can encourage lots of other people. I really feel that when we take our prayers, that are personal prayers, that are just about us, and we add this dimension of wanting to encourage others, of wanting to contribute to a peaceful planet, of wanting to share the power of this Buddhism and this practice with other people, it's like the universe listens and supports us even more. And I always kind of say this jokingly. If the universe was a person and I was sitting there saying, I want a job, I want a job, I need a job, whatever it is, and I'm chanting like, I need a job, or I need a boyfriend if I needed one. I don't, but well, let's pretend, or I need a new car, or whatever the prayer is. And all you're doing is sitting there going, I want this, I want this, I want this. From the perspective of the universe, it's like, great, you and everybody else. However, if you change that prayer to, I want a job where I can create value. I want a job where I can fulfill my potential in this world. I want a job where I can encourage a lot of people. I want to, through my practice, encourage and inspire other people and share this Buddhism with other people so that they can access their enlightened nature. Then all of a sudden, the universe is all ears. It's like, oh, this is different. This is somebody who understands actually the consciousness of the universe, who actually understands this eternal flow of creativity, of encouragement, of growth, of compassion, of wisdom. And this is somebody who's using their life to expand this flow. So, of course, life supports us when we do it. So, what are the two most important things to keep in mind when you want to change your karma? It's not intellect, it's not age, it's not experience. It's heart and a focus on the present moment. So Nichiren says it is the heart that is the most important. What does this mean? It means that as long as we remain undefeated in our heart, we will not suffer from our negative karma. Karma instead will be an incredible source of benefit and growth. So the important thing is to not be defeated in our heart. Daisaku Ikeda always says that a physical defeat is always preceded by spiritual defeat. So spiritual defeat, we have complete control over through our Buddhist practice. Also, chanting is how we change our heart. It's how we make hope. We expand our heart, we strengthen it. Nichiren said to chant to your heart's content. What does that mean? It means to chant until there's a shift in your heart, until you feel strong again, until you have a new vision, a new determination, until you have a deeper understanding and there's a wisdom and a clarity that kicks in. So sometimes that shift in one's heart can happen in 5 minutes. Sometimes it can take days or months even, depending on what it is that you are facing. The good news is that we have everything that we need to help us never be defeated throughout that journey and throughout that process. The second aspect of this idea of the power of our heart is this sense of mission that I just talked about. If we view our problems as our mission, with an awareness of a vow to work for world peace or Kozen Rufu, this vow, this heart also changes the power of negative karma over us. It literally protects us from the karma. The karma doesn't stick. It's like we're Teflon. So there's a really great metaphor about karma. In case you're thinking, oh, I can't imagine changing all my karma, all those causes, who knows what I did in this lifetime and past lifetimes. If we actually had to make positive causes to change every single negative cause we've ever made, that would take lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. This will go on forever. So the metaphor goes that if you look at the sky, so you think of the stars as all your negative karma, and you think, oh my gosh, there's so many stars. There's so many negative causes. Can you imagine the things that you have thought, said, or done that are negative in lifetime after lifetime? Yeah, maybe there might be as much as the stars in the universe. However, when the sun comes out, all of a sudden, even if the stars are there, you can't see them. And more importantly, they have no effect on you anymore. And that is how we view the power of our chanting and the power of the true cause of chanting in terms of accessing our enlightenment, that when you bring out the full sun and the full shining pure force of your life, even the stars don't affect you in the same way. So it's not so much that the karma is not there anymore, because the stars are still there. But when the sun's out, they do not have the same effect on anyone or anything. So your life becomes like Teflon. What changes as you change your karma, your life condition becomes bigger, happier, and wiser. And you no longer suffer from that, even the physical karma that you thought was unchangeable. And there's plenty of examples of that. of people who have lost limbs, of people who have undergone all kinds of tragedies and situations that were able to make their life condition so powerful that karma no longer had a negative influence on them. So when we bring out our Buddhahood, our lives become like Teflon. The karma doesn't stick anymore. However, it's not easy. It's hard to do it in one Namyo Renge Kyo. That's why a regular practice, a steady practice, a devoted practice is so important. And that's why ideally it's really great to practice within the SGI organization, because there's all these other people that are also committed and making causes. And there's constant access to dialogues, encouragement, experiences, study, and all of that can help us continue to deepen our practice. And an aspect of that sun coming out, I'd like to connect it to this idea of Ichinen Sanzen, which is another concept in Buddhism, which I'm not going to go into in great detail because we would be here for a while. And this is already turning into a long podcast. But I do want to mention it. So Ichinen Sanzen means 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. It means that the present moment includes everything. It includes all the dimensions of life. It includes all the aspects of how life manifests. It includes all the unfathomable aspects that we can't see and we don't understand. But it says that everything could be affected by a single moment. If we can galvanize all of our energy and really focus and bring out our enlightened nature and make a powerful determination to change our lives. And if we can say, I will absolutely change this. I will 100% win. I will use everything in my life. I will use everything in the universe, and I will definitely change the course of my life. So when we make these powerful, profound, deep determinations, particularly when we're chanting, it influences everything. It changes our destiny. It changes our karma. It changes everything. And people who don't practice Buddhism have done this kind of a thing where they've made incredibly deep, profound determinations and were able to manifest all kinds of things. The beauty is, if you're not a person like that, who has this incredible power of determination, who has this incredible ability to motivate yourself, or you don't need to worry. Chanting creates that. Chanting galvanizes that aspect of your life. So then you've got equal access to everybody of this transformative power of life. So it doesn't matter what your karma is, your background, whether you're good at determinations or goals or not. You can commit to a daily practice, you can chant, and all of a sudden you have access to the same mechanisms that other people have used in their lives, and without having to be somebody else. I know there was a book that came out that everyone loved, and it was, what is it? How to Be a Badass or something like that. But what if you don't want to be a badass? What if I don't want to be a badass woman who wants to be a CEO and run the world? I don't want to be a badass. But do I want to be really happy? Do I want to make dreams come true on my own terms as I am? Absolutely. And the beauty of chanting is you don't have to be like anybody else. You don't have to be a badass. You can if you want. You don't have to suddenly become quiet and meditative and philosophical. You don't actually have to become like anybody else. The beauty of chanting is you become more yourself. There was two concepts when I started practicing that I was very worried about, and was this idea of having a mentor and this idea of unity, and potentially maybe having to be like everybody else. And those answers were given to me very quickly. The idea of mentor was made very clear, that if you think of it in the same way that an opera singer has a great opera teacher, but any great teacher will want the student to sing in their own voice, then that's the kind of mentor I want. So if there's a teacher who passes on everything that they know to you, but they want you to sing in your own voice, then I'm good with that. And Daisaku Ikeda says, I have my mission, you have yours. He's not saying do my mission. He's saying do your mission, do your life. So that was number one. The other one that I was referring to initially is the importance of being our true self and being the best version of ourselves. Nichiren Daishonin talks about the beauty of different types of blossoms, whether it's cherry or damson flower or anything like that. And that the goal is that they blossom in their own unique way, that each has their unique beauty, and one should not try to be the other. So from the get-go, it was explained to me very clearly that the purpose of Buddhist practice is to really bring out your unique beauty, your unique potential, and that you don't actually have to be like anybody else. So if I like swearing, that's okay. I don't need to stop swearing. I can be wiser about who I do it in front of, maybe. But just because I'm a Buddhist does not mean that I have to stop swearing and suddenly become this really conservative, traditional female. It's absolutely not true. My unique nature is to express myself a certain way, but also to have wisdom and compassion and not be offensive to certain people. But that's just one example. I don't have to become somebody else. I can be myself, but just a better version of myself that is more value creative, more encouraging to people. So I think that's an important thing to understand too, is this idea of the uniqueness of our lives and our mission, and that the importance is to bring out our Buddhahood so that we can shine as we are. So when we talk about changing our karma or fulfilling our unique mission or karma as mission, what's really important is our determinations and our prayers and our goals. So prayer in this Buddhism is different than what you might think. And I'm just going to read something that really clarifies what it is not and what it is. So Daisaku Ikeda says, prayers are neither light dreams nor vague wishes. They should be firm pledges of determination. Prayers made with such strong resolve invite clear results, just as magnets attract iron. So prayers aren't like, oh, wouldn't it be nice? I hope, I wish, like it says, vague wishes, oh, whatever. It's firm pledges of determination. It is not, please, somebody do something for me. It is really, I have decided that I'm going to win, that I am the Buddha in charge of my own life. That's how we chant. I am the Buddha in charge of creating my own life. We chant from that perspective. Anything less than that will give a weaker result. And sometimes I can tell you that the process of chanting is going from the vague wishes, mild hopes, into determination. So I'm going to give you an example of my own process. So there was a time in my life where my dad had passed away. That whole period of time was riddled with all kinds of challenges and things to deal with. And yet I had to find a full-time job. And I remember chanting in front of the Gohonzon and thinking, oh, I need to get a job. This vague wish. Yeah, hopefully it'd be, I need to, blah, 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 blah. And then eventually chanting through that and going, I can't handle a full-time job right now. The next realization was, what I really would like is a part-time job with full-time pay. The next step after that was, that's impossible. That's ridiculous. How dare you chant for something like that? Who do you think you are? Are you nuts? How dare you chant for a part-time job with full-time pay? So there's this, so it starts with like, oh, wouldn't it be nice? I hope, I wish, it'd be great. And then voices of, are you crazy? But then as I chanted and I became really honest about where I was at, about the capacity of my life at that time, I got to a point in my chanting where I thought, no, this is actually the only thing I can do. This is the only outcome. It must be. I want to work. I want to fulfill my potential. But for this period of my life, I have to have part-time hours with a full-time pay. And as my determination strengthened in my chanting day after day, I got to a point where I was just like, this is exactly what's going to happen. This must happen. This is the only outcome. And on the day that I deepened that determination in a 100%, this is exactly how it's going to go. And it was that Ichinen Sanzen, 3,000 realms, single moment in practice. And I kid you not, I got a phone call right after that chanting session from a friend. And by the end of that week, I had a contract for a part-time job with full-time pay. And again, some of these experiences, I know they sound a little bit crazy for somebody who doesn't practice. For those who do practice, you've heard them a million times, so nobody's shocked with this. I have several experiences like that. I would say I have like 4, and I call them the Harry Potter experiences because they are literally experiences of summoning up this enlightened energy, committing to using my life for great good, committing to my mission for a lasting peace in the world, for Kozen Rufu, and then the environment responding. And I wish I could do it all the time, but I can't. But I'm going to have to do it again soon. So I'll tell you that story whenever that happens. I would say in many instances, the process of chanting is going from a place of either fatigue, of doubt, of suffering, of just meh, just being tranquil, being okay, and moving through those phases of, wouldn't it be nice? I really should change this. I have to change this. What do I have to do to change this? There's a moment always of self-reflection. And there's always a moment of, where can I change myself for this outcome to happen? Then there is this connection with a bigger mission, a bigger vow of encouraging other people with your experience. And then there's a moment where you just say, this is how it's going to go. I have decided this is how it's going to go. And then once you feel that from the depths of your life, the environment responds. Sometimes that process can last a short time or a long time. It depends on the depth of the karma. Some things take longer than others. The beauty of Buddhism and the beauty of chanting about our karma, no matter how long it takes, we are creating so much value along the way. The whole process, there is so much value being created. And we are ultimately, we want to be enjoying the adventure. We want to be enjoying the journey, until we get to that moment of shift, and that moment of value. So now I'd like to say a few words about how to change karma. Like, what are the steps? So number one, making a deep determination. Everything starts with that. Daisaku Ikeda says everything starts with prayer. Everything starts with a decision and a determination. So step two, fasten your seatbelts, because when you make a determination, it is very natural for resistance to come up. It's very natural karma to come up really big, and it's almost like you zoomed in on it. So if you have karma in relationships and you're trying to change something, the next thing that happens after your determination might be an even bigger argument with your partner. If you're trying to change your financial karma, the next thing that might happen in terms of the waves is a big fat bill. But the important thing is to understand that you made a determination. You sped up a speedboat. So in the same way that if you're on a speedboat on a lake and all of a sudden you want to get to a destination faster and you want to move more powerfully through that water, what's the first thing that happens? Waves. Bigger waves. And the only way to get to the other side faster is to just go through those waves and to enjoy the ride. So don't worry if your determination brings up more of that karma. It's simply an indication that you're on the right track, and you just have to stay steady and just keep that engine going at the same speed or faster. And then the third thing is to be ready to face yourself, to face the changes that you need to make, and to have the courage to look at your own life. So that part's really important as well. And sometimes you need to look in your own basement. There was one year I made a determination to go into the basement of my life and change some of the things that I had never changed. And my husband had said to me, I think you're struggling because there's something that's in your life that you have accepted as this is just who you are, and you've never thought to change it. And he said, I think it might be something really simple that you've just never looked at. And so you need to kind of check what's going on inside. And so I had made a determination to go into the basement of my faith and kind of look in the corners and see what I needed to change. And funnily enough, we had a huge flood in our actual physical basement, because I also wanted to change our physical basement because it was a massive mess. And this flood ended up hitting all the houses, 22 houses. We were the last ones hit. We only had about like a little bit, like a couple inches on the bottom. Some of the houses had like 5 feet of sewage. So we were the last house to get hit. We had a really good insurance policy. And in 2 days, our basement was completely clean. And the big benefit of that was my husband was able to build a new area that I could even do this podcast in. Anyway, all of that started with this prayer to clean the basement of my life. And so I think we have to be willing to look at our lives and be willing to change whatever it is we need to change. Fourth thing that we can do is to redirect our desires continuously towards good, to make good causes, like consciously try to make new causes and good causes in a new direction. New cause, take action. It's always chant, act, right? That constant cycle of moving forward is really important. The other important thing to keep in mind is that no matter how big a problem looks, it is not actually a problem. The real problem is our capacity, our strength, our confidence is not strong enough to look at the problem as something that we can transform. So this is again where the chanting comes in, where we expand our capacity and we look at the problem differently. So if our life is big enough, if our life becomes bigger than the problem, then it's no longer a problem. And this is where the chanting is so important, because if we try to change our karma just by thinking about it, our thinking is part of the problem. We got to this place in life because of our karmic bias, because of the filter that we see life through. So if we try to change our karma just by using our heads and that karmic filter, it is like trying to lift a chair while sitting on it. That's what makes it so hard. And this is why that 9th level of consciousness is so important. So part of the process is going to include battles with new fears, with doubts, with reminders of how your life has always been up until this point. But you're going to replace that with confidence, with respect, with a reminder of worth, with hope, and with your ultimate determination. Eventually, you will have some victory at the end of it. And the most important victory is to not be defeated along the way. So why would we undertake any of this? We can also sit back and be easygoing about our lives as well. But I think the important thing is to understand that on the other side of that is an incredible life condition of being undefeatable, of knowing that you can change anything, the joy of knowing that you can create something new for your life and a new direction. And anything that you change in your own life will benefit everybody else around you. I think this process is really the adventure of being alive. It is just the ultimate way to live, as far as I'm concerned. And I would like to end with the 3 quotes that I started the presentation with. So the first quote from Jose Toda: never accept suffering as your destiny. Daisaku Ikeda: if we cannot feel hope, it is time to create some. And Nichiren Daishonin: Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is like the roar of a lion. What sickness can therefore be an obstacle? So that is the view of karma from the perspective of the Lotus Sutra, of Nichiren Daishonin, and of the 3 presidents of the Soka Gakkai. So I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. The topic of karma is a very broad one, and there's going to be other podcasts in the future where I have discussions with various people, both on karma, on the 9 consciousnesses, and on Ichinen and Sanzen, which were all topics I touched on today. And I look forward to delving much deeper into all of these concepts, but I thought I would give an overview to start, and I hope there's been something valuable in this for you today. So thank you so much. Have a fantastic week, and I look forward to seeing you the next time. Thank you.